Now we'd like to welcome our conference sponsor to come up for the next hour or so, talk to you about a variety of issues that are of interest to you. And so I'd like to welcome Aaron Lemke, Vice President, Senior Relationship Manager, Middle Market Banking for Arizona. That is business card about 6 feet long.
It is.
For Wells Fargo and Company. And he'll introduce several of his colleagues.
All right, well, there I am. Well, thank you and good morning. So thanks, Dean, for the introduction, and welcome you all. Thanks to NAU and Director Roos, Chairman Melendez, thanks for being here, and all the honored guests. We really appreciate the time this morning. As Dean mentioned, my name is Aaron Lemke. I work with Wells Fargo's commercial banking down in Phoenix, and I'm fortunate enough, along with my colleague Keith Helmer, to work with a lot of the tribal entities across the state of Arizona. So we're a little closer. Can you hear me now? Better? I'm trying not to mess with our technology up here. A little better there? Okay. So Aaron Lemke, work with Keith and Wells Fargo across Arizona and our Native American communities. And so, again, thank you for being here this morning. I just want to take a few minutes to really talk about kind of where Wells Fargo's been in our involvement in Indian country and where we hope to be down the line. Today there are approximately 560 plus federally recognized tribes across the country. Wells Fargo is fortunate enough to work with over 200 of those in 27 states. And so, you know, as we look to that, we've been serving those communities for more than 50 years, and we look to continue to do that for 50 more and 100 more and well into the future. In order to support that along the way, today we currently have 19 branches, 42 ATMs in 7 states that work on 17 different reservations. We have over $2 billion of credit commitments and have committed $44 million in tax investments. These investments include financing for community development, low-income housing tax credits, and sponsorship to affordable housing plan subsidies for tribal housing projects. We're continually looking every day for additional ways that we can partner with our communities. And one of those ways that we do every day is charitable giving. We invest in tribal communities across the United States, and over the past 4 years, we've contributed more than $16 million to support hundreds of tribal nonprofit organizations nationwide for community service that benefit American Indian communities and their peoples. As part of this, we work with Community Development Financial Institutions, or CDFIs, and Native American Assistance Programs, which are programs that award it's a competitive award program through which financial assistance and technical assistance is given to build capacity of Native CDFIs that serve American Indian communities. Basically, this is an area where communities are lacking adequate access to affordable financial products and services. Financial assistance awards support financial activities of Native CDFIs certified by the CDFI Fund and are provided in the form of loans, grants, deposits, and equity investments. In 2016 alone, Wells Fargo donated $540,000 to 2 CDFIs. One of those is the Fort Vans in Eagle Butte, which received $300,000 for technical assistance and expanded its service area. And the other one is Northwest Native Development Fund, which received $240,000 to increase lending to Native American entrepreneurs. Internally, and from an indirect perspective, we partner with third parties all the time. And in addition, we also provide grants and other kind of funding. And one of those recently was to the American Indian Graduate Center. This was a scholarship grant that we provided in 2015 for $3 million. And what that did was it afforded individuals, it was an outreach program for individuals, an engagement program that encouraged American Indian and Alaska Native students to seek scholarships and other educational services available through the American Indian Graduate Center. In 2016, Wells Fargo awarded 120 tribal students $5,000 for each academic year. There were 30 tribal students awarded who self-identified themselves from the Navajo Nation. So in that light, I would encourage anybody that is interested in seeking that kind of funding to visit the AIGCS.org and search for Wells Fargo to learn more about our scholarship opportunities. In addition, it's a great opportunity for full-time and degree-seeking college freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors to to receive up to $5,000 for 1 year study. Again, you can apply at the website that I mentioned, and applications are currently accepting up until May 1. In addition to funding, we also provide free college prep workshops known as Know Before You Go. Wells Fargo did 4 college prep workshops last year. Phoenix, Pembroke, North Carolina, Rapid City, South Dakota, and Seattle, Washington. And we have done 1 workshop this year in Oklahoma. From an internal perspective, given our long-standing commitment to the American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian communities, and in line with our culture of inclusion and diversity, Wells Fargo has an established Native Peoples Team Member Network. We encourage team members to engage with and build understanding and support for these very important communities of Wells Fargo serves, and to provide insight into the cultures and needs of the communities. By having team members who are also tribe members as part of this group, we are better aligned to remain closer to these communities. In addition, we've also established a Native American outreach project team whose goal is to create a more cohesive approach and specialized business and communication strategy for serving American customers, prospects, and communities. Both groups meet routinely to discuss ways to continue to collaborate across these great communities, whether through financial advocacy, ways to get involved locally, or through charitable giving, or a combination of any of the above. Quickly before moving on to introducing our next speaker, I also wanted to briefly touch on another way we are partnering with American Indian communities, which has been through a company called Grid Alternatives, which I'll touch on after kind of our next speaker speaks. But basically what that is, it's a way that we have built a great partnership with Grid in the solar world and in the sustainable investing space, so that we are bringing solar power to Native American and American Indian communities. And it's been a great success so far, and I look forward to touching on that more in a few minutes. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our next speaker, and someone who will provide far more entertaining commentary than I can. So Sean McCarthy is a Regional Chief Investment Officer for the Southwest Region of Wells Fargo Bank. He serves as the investment thought leader for our region and provides insights and interpretation of the economy and financial markets. Sean is a voting member of both the Investment Policy Committee and Investment Solutions Committee of Wells Fargo Bank. And he will provide an economic update and outlook specific to our state of Arizona, including migration and its importance to Arizona economy, retirement and how it plays into the hands of Arizona, the importance of good jobs, job growth, and trade policy. So Sean, welcome.
Thanks, Aaron. It's my pleasure to be able to join you today. I'll give you some perspective on the state economy. We'll talk about the economy more broadly, too, as a backdrop for what you're going to hear from our social impact team in a little bit. And I also want to touch on a couple of the risks that I see for the Arizona economy. One of those that exists up here would be very impactful to the tribal economy and potentially in a negative way would have ripple effects throughout Arizona. So we'll talk through some of these things. And as Aaron said, I want to touch on migration first. Migration is very important to the Arizona economy. If you go back for the 30 years before the financial crisis, what you would find is that for those 3 decades, each annual period, there were more people moving into the state of Arizona than moving out. It was a source of great growth for the state, and the average population growth for the state during that time was over 3% per year. Then the financial crisis hit. The housing bubble burst. The unemployment rate in the state went up over 11%. A very difficult time. And in the 2008 to 2014 period, what we found was migration went flat, as did the economy in the state. We had just as many people moving out as were moving in. Now that has turned. The economy's recovered. In 2015, we saw positive migration start again, 1.4% population growth that year. In 2016, last year, we saw 1.1% population growth in the state, over 77,000 people increasing the population here, and it should continue to grow from here. Of course, one of the reasons that people come to Arizona, one of the main reasons is for retirement. Now, during the financial crisis, it got difficult for people to make that decision to retire and come to Arizona. Their houses were underwater. They owed more than they were worth. Their retirement savings that they had built up, much of that in stocks, had been damaged during the financial crisis. So people who were thinking about retiring around that time figured out that they had to work for a number of more years to be able to rebuild those retirement savings, to be able to get equity back in their homes. And that's happened now. That's happened so strongly that the rate of baby boomers retiring is now 10,000 per day. And that's a very positive factor for the migration in Arizona. But it's a negative factor for the U.S. economy. We're losing a key part of our workforce. So baby boomers are now down to about 1/4, getting close to a quarter of the U.S. workforce, and they're trading places with millennials. This is something that we talk about in one of our investment themes this year, called investing across generations. So baby boomers who have become less predominant in the workforce, millennials now making up the largest part of the U.S. workforce. Over 1/3 of workers are from the millennial generation, and trading places in terms of spending and saving. Baby boomers starting to spend those retirement savings that they build back up as they retire and start a new phase of their lives, and millennials who are just starting to save for retirement. Our social impact team that you're going to hear from plays an important role for millennials who are a much more socially conscious generation than those that came before them, and many of them want those values reflected in their investments. The other thing about millennials is that they're hitting a key spending and home buying demographic in the U.S. It's those people ages 35 to 44. And we know that household formation creates a virtuous cycle in an economy. So when you have household formation, greater rates of household formation, you have less poverty, you have less unemployment, you have better health. That's why Bernie Sanders, just in the past week, came out, U.S. Senator Sanders, talking about Native Americans specifically, said it's our responsibility to provide affordable housing. Knowing that that doesn't just combat homelessness in tribal communities, but it also creates that virtuous cycle and fosters that idea of a better virtuous economic cycle. So it's good to hear Aaron talk about our support for affordable housing in Native American communities. Now, the other thing that this age 35 to 44-year-old that I talk about, just to put that in perspective where we are in terms of the demographics, it started to decline in our economy generally for the U.S. in about the year 2000. If you go back 35 years before the year 2000, we're at 1965. And from 1965 through the mid to late 70s, birth rates declined in the U.S. We had the Vietnam War, abortion became legal in the U.S., and we saw birth rates decline. That started showing up in this key demographic about the year 2000. So we had about 45 million in this key spending demo in the year 2000, and what it's declined to is from 45 million back then to just above 40 million right now. But as millennials start to hit this key spending demographic, what happens is it starts to increase. It starts to increase this year, 2017, and we go from down towards 40 million, not just back up to the 45 million we had in the year 2000, but by 2030 getting close to 50 million in this key spending demographic. It's going to be a very powerful force for our economy in the decade that lies ahead. The question for Arizona is, we know we'll get our shares of retirees migrating to the state, but how do we capture this up-and-coming demographic? How do we keep the talent that we're producing in universities like NAU? How do we keep them here in Arizona? And the way we do that is through jobs. The good news is that Arizona seems to be doing decent, having decent progress in terms of job creation. Last year, the state of Arizona broke back into the top 10 of states for job creation in the U.S., ranking number 9 now. 68,000 jobs created in the state last year. The total non-farm employment in Arizona is now over 2.7 million, so back above where it was before the financial crisis. In terms of total employment for the state, now over 3.1 million people employed in the state of Arizona. That's at a record according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Not only is Arizona top 10 in creating jobs in the U.S., in the financial sector it ranks number 2. In the healthcare sector in the U.S. it ranks number 5. In fact, of those 68,000 jobs that were created in the state last year, 1 in 5 of those jobs were from the healthcare sector, a decently paying sector in the economy. And we've heard some positive things from the technology sector as well recently. Intel, talking about making investments of $7 billion that include hiring 3,000 people in the state. But one of the risks that I'm going to talk about is the potential that we could lose 3,000 jobs up here if we have to decommission the largest coal-fired power plant in the western part of the United States. That would have a damaging effect on the economy here. Between the power plant and the coal mine that sit on tribal lands 100 miles north of here, we're talking about 3,000 people that are employed. And the ripple effect that's there for the state economy is that instead of using the local coal to generate power in the state, now we'll be more reliant on importing natural gas. And if we're more reliant on importing natural gas, we could end up in a situation like California was in 2000 and 2001. Right now, natural gas is abundant and affordable, but there's a lot of investment in our economy trying to figure out how to use it. And that energy crisis in California is something we don't want to replicate. We don't want to have to rely too much on imported energy. So, and even though California is not in a crisis, when you look at the cost for utilities in California, Arizona, well, compared to Arizona, the national average, Arizona is about 92% of the national average, so 8% below the national average of what we pay in utilities. California is 26% above that. And I think what's supportive here is that we've got an administration that talks about using all forms of energy, including alternative energies and coal, supporting domestic jobs. President Trump is aligned with, I think, where we should end up. But it's a risk we have to watch. So that's the risk in the northern part of the state. And in the southern part of the state, the risk is around trade. The potential for tariffs, the potential for border adjustment. With Mexico, that represents 37% of the goods exported from Arizona. That would be damaging to the exports we make to that country. The second largest destination for exported goods from Arizona is Canada, and it represents only 9%. So that's how significant Mexico is to the trade economy here in Arizona. Now, the U.S. dollar, the strong U.S. dollar that we've seen in recent years has also been damaging. We saw it show up in Arizona exports last year. This year, though, the dollar, at least since January, versus the Mexican peso, the dollar has softened up a bit, thank goodness, because we got to a point in January where the peso got as weak as 22 to the dollar. Now that it's firmed up a little bit, it's less than 19 peso to the dollar. And what that means is the Mexican currency can now buy 15% more in Arizona's goods than it could just a few months ago. What we heard from President Trump yesterday should keep the dollar from getting too strong too fast. He came out directly and said the U.S. dollar is too strong. He talked about wanting to keep interest rates low. That'll also keep the U.S. dollar from getting too strong. And then the other thing he said, which was a bit surprising, is that he wants to keep Fed Chair he might keep Fed Chair Janet Yellen as head of the Fed when her term expires next year. That he was open to her staying on, and that was the first time we heard that from him. And she's someone who would also be supportive of lower interest rates, creating a weaker dollar, and not letting the dollar get too strong too fast. The dollar will strengthen a little bit, but if it's in a measured way, that's something that our exporters can handle better. The biggest positive there in terms of trade is that the administration has softened up on NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So they've gone from talking about wanting to scrap that totally to now, well, we're going to keep NAFTA, we're just going to make adjustments to it. That's a much better stance for Arizona exporters when it comes to NAFTA. And look, the pillars of that trade agreement are strong to protect intellectual property, reduce tariffs, protect the environment, increase cross-border investment. It's a strong agreement that way, and in the past 24 years that it's existed, you've had trade go amongst the U.S., Canada, and Mexico from $290 billion a year to now over $1.2 trillion a year. It would have been very disruptive if that trade agreement was scrapped in whole. So I'm going to make time for our other speakers here. I will be available for questions at the end of this part of the program when we open it up to the floor. But thank you for allowing me to spend some valuable time with you. Aaron?
And before I turn it over to our next speakers, I wanted to kind of intro the segue into what they'll be talking about and just really talk about Wells Fargo's commitment to the environment, sustainability, and human rights, especially specific to American Indians and Native Americans and indigenous peoples. So our social impact investing team is on stage today, and we're really conscientious about that. We're really conscientious about what we do with the environment and how it pertains to those that we work with. And so one major project we're collaborating on to touch on this, is touched upon through our human rights statement, which we recognize that governments have the duty to protect human rights, and our company has a responsibility to respect human rights. So we recognize that the identities and cultures of indigenous peoples are inextricably linked to the lands on which they live and the natural resources, including air and water upon which they depend. And we respect indigenous peoples' rights to determine their own way of life in their own lands, according to their time-honored cultures, traditions, and beliefs. We also recognize the rights of these communities to meaningful and appropriate consultation regarding issues affecting their sacred lands and natural resources, traditionally owned or otherwise occupied and used today and for future generations. And again, since our next speakers will be talking about sustainable investing, I wanted to take a moment to highlight an initiative that Wells Fargo is partnering on through a company called Grid Alternatives, which we're currently bringing benefits of solar power to Native Americans and American Indians across the country. So just a few benefits of the solar partnership. Savings of 75 to 90% on costs for families for electricity. Clean, renewable energy whose source is non-imposing on land. Community participation and green jobs training. Employment opportunities through grid subcontractors. This is specifically going on today in California. A turnkey model that includes outreach, education, project management and installation, services, and industry standard warranties. And we're currently leveraging corporate, federal, and state solar funding for these. We're positioned for success. Grid Alternatives brings together all the elements for successful solar projects in tribal communities. They have 10 regional offices across the United States. They have a dedicated tribal program staff, a successful and replicable model. Extensive experience working with California tribes and developing flexible procedures for the unique structures. And we've been a long-time partner with Grid. Right now, and I think there's a slide up here from Solar Power to the People, it's an initiative. Since 2007, we've committed to providing more than $4 million in grants to Grid Alternatives. It's brought solar power to more than 6,000 families and trains more than 20,000 volunteers and job trainees. Wells Fargo team members have also dedicated their volunteer efforts to install solar power for 58 families. Grid Alternatives helps tribal communities achieve their clean energy goals while providing financial savings and job training opportunities to improve their members' quality of life. Since 2010, Grid Alternatives has partnered with 40 Native American tribes and 40 Native American trainees to install solar electric systems for more than 490 tribal member families. These systems are helping to provide needed savings and employment opportunities to tribal communities, which face some of the highest poverty and employment rates in the United States. Grid was recently honored for their work with tribal communities in 2013 by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and continues to expand their partnerships with tribal communities across the country. In 2015, Grid held its first tribal solarathon in which 8 systems with 4 tribes across the country over a 2-week span were installed to raise awareness on the potential of solar PV and tribes. In 2015, Grid Alternatives completed 129 solar projects in tribal communities and provided training to 125 Native Americans who completed over 6,500 hours of hands-on solar installation. I was fortunate enough to be a part of this in Loop, Arizona, on part of the Navajo Nation tribal land, with one of my colleagues who's also a member of the Navajo Nation and works for Wells Fargo in Loop, Arizona. We were fortunate enough to go up there and work with Mr. Herman Yazi, who was a veteran of Vietnam, and had been living basically without power aside from a small generator his entire life. That's one of about 15,000 homes on the reservation up on the Navajo Nation that don't have power today. And we were able to go up there over a 2-day project and actually watch this $15,000 commitment come to life. And it was amazing to see what he could enjoy. He could turn on his television set, he could turn on the lights, he could turn on the refrigerator and actually stock meat, which he had never been able to do before. To see the smile on his face and the things that he can enjoy, which some of us take for granted, I think, every day, was a very powerful and meaningful opportunity for not only myself, but I think for the partnership that Wells Fargo has done with Grid Alternatives, and just shows the power that this investing has done and will continue to do over time. A couple other bits. In 2016, tribal work of Grid Alternatives provided opportunities for 144 Native Americans to clear over 5,000 hours of hands-on training on 76 projects. A few other notables: there's 10 projects going on with the Rosebud Sioux Housing Authority in South Dakota, 6 with the Chippewa Cree tribe on the Rocky Boy Reservation in Montana. In spring of 16, 3 off-grid systems were refurbished, 2 in the Bird Springs chapter of the Navajo Nation, and 1 with the Los Coyotes band of the Cahuilla and Capena Indians, helping 3 families gain access to electricity. Grid Alternatives expects to complete over 100 solar projects on tribal lands in 2017. Very powerful, including 56 installations with the Bishop Pout tribe, while providing hands-on job training experience, including tribal members being hired through Grid Alternatives and their subcontracted partnership program. Grid Alternatives Tribal Program is also partnering with tribal colleges throughout the country to provide students with hands-on training to supplement their solar curriculum and exploring opportunities for energy efficiency combined with solar to maximize impact and cost savings. I have more information on Grid Alternatives Tribal Program, so if you're interested, be happy to tell you more about that either after the panel or as a one-off, so please come and see me. And now, without further ado on this side, I'd like to introduce Wells Fargo's social impacting team. Wells Fargo's commitment to sustainability and our continued efforts to partner with tribal communities is evident, and our next team of speakers is going to change the focus to outside of Wells Fargo. They're going to highlight how they evaluate the company's responsible and sustainable practices, and how they use this type of information to select good, long-term, value-added investments. The team is a specialty team within the private bank that manages responsible and sustainable investment strategies for clients at Wells Fargo. Sustainability practices of the company are a core component of what the social impact investing team looks at. The industry calls the environment, social, and government analysis, and our team will tell you all about it. So I'll now introduce the team and how this powerful investment technique can help responsible and sustainable-minded investors better align investment actions with personal values. So with that being said, it's my pleasure to introduce Jane Marie Petty, Kim Ryan, and Claire Veuthey.
Thank you, Aaron. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jane Marie Petty, and I'm the Director of Social Impact Investing Consulting. And I wanted to take a moment to thank Levi Esquera and the Center for American Indian Economic Development for including us in your conference. And I wanted to mention that we are money managers and we're very impressed by the 7th-generation money management education game that Levi and NAU students created to educate Native American youth. So I encourage people to go over and check out the information that Levi has. Aaron touched on Wells Fargo's commitment to the environment and sustainability and human rights. I'm going to shift the focus from Wells Fargo's commitment to sustainability to how we invest sustainably. What we do is really help clients align their investment decisions with their personal values. As I said, we are a specialty management team within Wells Fargo Wealth Management. We are led by Lloyd Kurtz. Lloyd is the head of the Social Impact Investing team and has many, many years of experience with social investment techniques and he was one of the developers of the first responsible investment indexes. Lloyd's sorry he couldn't be with us today, but he's also an academic at Berkeley and is a native Alaskan. Speaking today is Kimberly Ryan. Kim has managed investment portfolios for over 15 years and is the head of our portfolio equity management team. Kim is a chartered financial analyst and has presented to international audiences on the subject of social impact investing and engagement activities on corporate governance. Kim is a graduate of the University of Notre Dame and is a transplant from the East Coast. Our other speaker is Claire Veuthey. Claire is the head of our environmental, social, and governance research. And Claire has worked in many countries, including Singapore, Amsterdam, London, and Toronto. And she has become quite knowledgeable and experienced with environmental and social governance research on an international basis. Claire is a graduate of King's College in London and the Graduate Institute of International Development Studies in Geneva, and she is fluent in 3 languages. Claire is one of the first charter holders of the Fundamentals of Sustainable Accounting Methods, and also is a frequent speaker on sustainability and social impact investing. So Kim and Claire are going to take the next 25 minutes to discuss how we invest for our clients and align those financial and personal values with our investment techniques. So without further ado, I will introduce Kimberly Ryan.
Well, thank you again for inviting us to come here and present today. We're very excited to be a part of this conference, and we think we bring a unique perspective as investors on how economic development is impacted by business, the investments that people make in businesses and in individuals, and the good that can be done for society as a result of those investments. We do not see them as mutually exclusive, although obviously at times we don't always achieve the outcomes that we're looking for. $22.9 trillion. That is how much is invested globally in sustainable and responsible investments. For some of you, this might be the first time you're hearing about this type of investing. In the US, we were a little bit behind the curve compared to our European counterparts, but the amount invested in US strategies is about $8 to $9 trillion today. So this is not a flash in the pan. The momentum in this field is growing very, very strongly, and we think it's only going to continue. So sustainability. What is sustainability? Sustainability is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Sounds quite reasonable. But the reality is it's quite difficult to do and can be very challenging. So why should we care about sustainability? Perhaps this is I'm preaching to the choir in a room with a lot of people that already understand the concept of sustainability and the importance of planning out for multiple generations. But if you'll indulge me for a second, I'll provide sort of a personal anecdote on this topic. So my mother is a great woman. I'm sure everyone thinks their mother is a wonderful person. She has served people all of her life in small ways and also in big ways. She and my father retired out west a number of years ago, and she left a community that she had been in for almost 30 years. And I think she felt a profound sense of loss at leaving that community and going someplace new where she didn't have those ties. And she frankly didn't have the support that she had by contributing to that community over a number of years. So enter this woman, her name is Nancy. My mother would see her loading up her truck at Trader Joe's several mornings a week. She was in her 80s. My mother's not shy of strangers, a little bit different than myself. I would not go up to a stranger, but she went up to this woman and said, "Hey, can I help you?" Nancy was a bit taken aback by this, and I think at first said, no, I don't need any help. But my mother broke her down over time. And so my mother started to help her load the truck on multiple mornings. And it turns out that Nancy, the last 30 years, since her husband had passed away, had been collecting food from the local stores, as well as other sundry items, and driving them down to the Central Valley on a daily basis to deliver these goods to migrant workers that were in camps that had very, very little. And so my mother, over time, again, gained Nancy's trust. She was very concerned about the privacy of the people that she was serving. And my mother started to pick up some of the routes that she was doing to help out. When Nancy died in her early 90s, a foundation was set up in her honor, and my mother joined the board and continued this work. Today, in the United States of America, we produce more food than we've ever produced in history. And yet people still go hungry. Why is this? 30 to 40% of the food that we produce is wasted. Is this really a sustainable outcome? So the third question is, what does investing have to do with sustainability? Well, as investors, I would view sustainability as a set of risks and opportunities. The risk is that today we're producing all this food, yet it's producing a lot of waste. It's not producing the outcome that we're looking for, and it's having a profound effect on our environment. The risk is that we're creating future food insecurity for our world. But the opportunities are huge. Opportunities to use our talents to come up with new ways of producing food. Opportunities to get that food waste into the hands of people that can use it before it goes bad. And you can do that in small ways, like Nancy's project, or you can do that in large ways. And there are a lot of impact investors looking at trying to solve these issues today. Economic development happens from two primary catalysts. The first is access to financial capital, and the second is human capital. Everyone in this room has human capital. We have our talents and our gifts that we can bring to bear in our workplace, with our families, and in our communities. Financial capital can be a little bit harder to come by. So there's some in this room that have access to financial capital, and then there's some that do not. For those that have access to capital, there's three things that you can do with that capital. You can put it in a bank, or the proverbial putting it under the mattress. I would not recommend that. Although that's kind of what it's been like for the last several years. If you did have cash and you put it into the bank, you can invest it today in projects or items that are going to produce what I call positive return on investment, whatever that is, whether it's a social return that you're looking for or whether it's a financial return. Or you can invest it for the future. I would argue that the first option is not a very good option. So if you look at this chart, and you look at the gold bars, look at the blue bars, that is the rate on cash since the beginning of the millennium. You look at the gold bars, that is the rate of inflation every year over that same period of time. You take the difference between the rate you would have gotten investing, putting your money in the bank after inflation, the highlighted area, let's see if I can use this pointer. The highlighted area is the real return on cash over this period of time. in every year, except for basically 3 years, in the last 16 years, you would have lost money in real terms. That's not a very sustainable way of using your capital. Presuppose that if you didn't need the cash today, and you didn't have a good place to invest it today, but you knew sometime in the future, you may have a better use for that cash. If you put it into a balanced portfolio, which in this case is a combination of stocks, simple stocks and bonds, and you invested it over that same period of time, from the year 2000 until the end of last year, you would have created an additional, if you had $1 million to start, I should say, you would have had an additional $1.5 million at the end of that investment period to put to work for projects that you felt were worthy. Could be for individuals in this room, maybe you're saving for someone's college. Maybe you're saving up to buy your first house. Maybe you're going to start a business in the future. If you had just left that money in cash, it wouldn't have grown that much. More pointedly, if you looked at the real return over that same period of time, the cash portfolio would actually have declined in value. So you had $1 million to start, and you would have less than $1 million at the end of that period. Whereas if you had invested it, you would have been able to, again, have an extra $800,000 or so to put towards good works. So, what is the highest and best use of the capital that you have today? We work with a lot of foundations and endowments and nonprofits. They have grants that they need to make today, projects they want to fund today to deliver on their mission as an organization, but they are also designed to go far into the future, much like a community or a nation. And so they need to think about what they can actually invest for the future. We work with these clients to figure out how much do they need to keep in liquid assets today to meet those needs, and what can they actually invest to meet those needs at some point in the future. The good news is that when you do have a little bit extra, whatever you have, even a small amount, it will compound over time. And when you invest that money, you don't have to invest that money in something that is counter to your mission, either as an individual or as an organization. So if you care about diversity and equal opportunity, we can dial in on that in the way that we invest client portfolios. If you care about environmental stewardship, we can do that as well. We call this ESG. It stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance. And the best way to think about it is, what are the activities and behaviors that a company engages in every day that are going to make it live a very long time? So it gets back to the concept of sustainability. It's those things that you don't see on the financial statement. It really relates to these stakeholder relationships that every company has. The relationship that it has with its shareholders, with its employees, its customers, its regulators, suppliers, and the community. When these things are out of balance, it can lead to a very bad outcome. And I just want to give you one example of how ESG can help avoid a risky investment and avoid a bad outcome. There's a company in California, it's called Theranos. It is purported to have developed a technology that can take a small drop of blood and run a myriad number of tests on just that small amount of blood. If successful, it would lower the cost of lab testing, lower the cost ultimately, potentially, of healthcare. for individuals, which obviously is very important in the world that we live in today. Back in 2000, at its peak, the company was worth almost $10 billion. It's a private company funded by venture capitalists. In 2015, Wall Street Journal ran an expose, I'll call it, on this company, challenging the accuracy of this machine, validity of the machine, whether the machine was actually used to run the tests that the company said it was running on the blood samples that it was taking. And it was determined in this article that they frankly were not using this technology for the majority of the tests that they were running. It was also an indictment of the culture of the company, which was highly secretive. Employees had been asked to sign non-disclosure agreements, and in some cases, employees working in the same department didn't know what the other people in that company, in their own department, were working on. It came down to the top. The board, which didn't have a lot of subject matter experts on it, had a lot of political figures, didn't seem to be connecting the dots here. As a result, the regulators got involved, and they banned the CEO from having any involvement in a lab for 2 years. Kind of a challenge for a company that's kind of your business. Today, I'm not sure how much the company's worth, but it's worth significantly less than $10 billion. And they've laid off half their staff. If you had been looking at this company through the lens of ESG, you would have looked at the relationship that employees had with the company, and it would have raised a red flag. You would have looked at the relationship that they had with their regulator. Same answer. Their customer. Huge breach of duty to their customer. Customers relying on an accurate result from this machine for their health, and they're not getting it. So this is how ESG can help identify a bad investment. That's just one piece of our investment process. We also look at fundamentals, we look at financial statements, we look at the company's competitive advantage, we look at quantitative metrics, and in each case, what we're looking at is what are the risks and opportunities that I see with this particular investment. Sometimes they'll come up in the realm of ESG, sometimes they will come up in the realm of the quantitative. If we see a high level of short interest in a company, that's an example of a quantitative risk that we might not want to take. Or on the fundamental side, if we see their margins contracting over a long period of time and we can't explain why that's happening, that might also be a red flag. But it's important to note that ESG is what we think actually is a difference maker. It differentiates us from our competitors who don't look at these things. I would analogize it to a blind spot. You're driving down the road, your side mirror is broken. You're in a rush. You realize you have to get off the freeway quickly. You forget to turn around to look. Before you know it, a car is hitting you. Totally preventable. Totally preventable. But you didn't look. This is what ESG does for us in our investment process. When we talk about sustainability, we're looking forward. What are the risks and opportunities? Is the company meeting the challenges we think that they're going to face? How is that going to impact the cash flow of that company? And ultimately, we think that investing with that eye on the future will generate much positive outcomes for our clients, and it also allow them to invest that money with their values. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Claire to talk a little bit more about how we integrate ESG.
Thanks, Kim. I think Kim really drove home the importance of not only of investing, but of understanding how your capital is invested and of understanding the values that those decisions are based on. your portfolio, your investment portfolio might not be the first place you think of when you think of enacting change in the world or the effect that you can have. As, again, Kim has outlined, it's a really important manner of participating economically in the world that you want to see. So what I'll do is go through a couple of methods that investors use in order to implement their values in their investment decisions. There's three main ones, and I'll give examples, of course, of how our team works. The first one is probably the most general, is integration. Again, Kim alluded to this in her example with Theranos. So ESG, again, is the information that's not typically found in financial statements. It's what you'll find in a press release from the company, in a corporate social responsibility report, in reviews on Glassdoor, for example, of employee reviews of how a company treats its employers. And that's a big part of how we look at companies. So how the company treats folks it has some control over, so typically its employees and its suppliers, but also folks it has a little bit less control over, so it's customers, it's regulators, the environment. And we really like to see companies that look for partnerships and opportunities to improve their business outcome in partnership with folks that they depend on. So just an example here, a couple weeks ago, Howard University made an announcement, so it's a historically black college, made an announcement that it would open a campus on Google's campus in Mountain View. And as you probably know, the tech industry has had real trouble kind of recruiting from a diverse pool of candidates and retaining those folks. And for me, this was a really great illustration of a company really looking for partnership in a way that benefits Howard students and that benefits its own recruitment efforts and hopefully retention efforts. Another example we often look at is Microsoft. So the company has developed a really unusual program to recruit folks on the autism spectrum who generally are really poorly served by a traditional interview process. And again, for us, that's an example of a company really looking to recruit and retain talent that it really wasn't looking for properly in the first place, both to develop better products and also to develop products that will serve a spectrum of potential customers with disabilities. So if you want to think a little bit out into the future, what does a smartphone or a personal computer look like for someone who's visually impaired? Well, we don't really know yet, or at least I haven't seen any great examples, but I think having someone or a number of folks who are visually impaired on your staff probably gives you a better shot at developing a product. So both from a social good and a commercial point of view, we feel like companies who take a little bit of a holistic view and put in the work to engage more thoughtfully with all their stakeholders are going to have a better run at it. The second method that we use is engagement, and essentially that's dialogue and conversation, which, as you know, has been used to broker partnerships for as long as history has been around. So investors do have certain rights when it comes to the companies they own shares in, and typically those are relatively limited and relatively scripted, but what we do when we see a company that we generally feel is on the right track but might be missing something crucial, and sometimes it means having a diverse board, for example, to really represent all perspectives, ensuring, again, that it's doing the work that it needs to recruit from a diverse set of candidates. We will engage company management in a conversation to make sure that they know where we're coming from. The privileged seat that we have is that, by and large, shareholders and companies' interests are very much aligned. We want the company to do well. So it's really meant to be a very collaborative conversation and a real kind of partnership, again. But sometimes we help them see blind spots that they might have missed in their focus, and sometimes it's excessive on the next quarter. Our team really is looking to the long term, and we don't want to see a company juice up returns for this quarter at the expense of next year, the year after, or further down the line. Again, another example of this is a large integrated oil and gas company recently named a climate expert to its board of directors, which is both surprisingly unusual. It's pretty obvious that oil and gas companies will be impacted by climate change, but quite a number of them have been relatively obstructionist and have not done a good job of showing investors or the public how they plan to manage that change in their economics. And this nomination to the board was really remarkable because it happened after years of pressure from both investors and environmental activists. So we saw that as a really good sign. I think the company still has a lot to prove, but it's a start in knowing that someone with real expertise in a broader environmental and economic change that absolutely will impact the company's business now has a seat on the board, and that perspective will be represented. The last example is really two sets of methods. Divestment and really avoidance is sort of the big brother of divestment, if you will. So a number of our clients really want to stay away, for example, from chemical weapons for obvious reasons that have hit the press recently. Chemical weapons are considered controversial weapons. They're illegal under international humanitarian law, which is the traditional law of war. And there are actually very few listed companies globally that are involved in manufacturing and selling these weapons. So many of our clients say, you know what, we'd really like to stay away from that. We don't think, and we know it won't have a major impact on the investment. So please make sure you track those companies and that we don't own any of those shares. It's similar, for example, if we're serving a Muslim investor, they generally would not want to hold a large pork processor or something like that. So we will avoid companies that really, in the core of their business, run counter to our clients' values. The other side of this is when engagement, in the previous example, has broken down. So if we've been trying to talk to a company for a long time, we know a number of other investors and shareholders have been talking to the company to try to encourage change, and we fail to see any kind of change, then eventually the last option that you have is to leave your seat at the table and to divest from the stock. So that's something we do rarely. It's really kind of a last resort, especially if we've done the work to own the share in the first place, or the company stock in the first place, but it is an option that we have. A last point I'd like to make is that really there is no perfect company. We look for the best, obviously, in sector diversified portfolios, but there are often some trade-offs. There's a very big semiconductor company with a very big presence in Chandler, Arizona, for example, which we generally think is a really good participant in the processes we're looking at. And our job is really to figure out what matters most, right? So what's most important for this company? It's not getting an A on every single factor, but we think it's getting an A on all the issues that matter most to its business and to its stakeholders. So for a semiconductor company, water management is really important. We need a lot of very clean water in order to manufacture chips. This company has an agreement with the city of Chandler to clean and repurpose water for the city to then use, or vice versa. Material sourcing is important, so there are a lot of conflict minerals that go into semiconductor chip manufacturing. Knowing where that cobalt, where that gold, or where that tungsten and tin comes from is really difficult. It's often several layers of suppliers down, and it's difficult for the company to just decide that all the gold in its chips will now be from safely mined areas. But the company nonetheless has leverage over suppliers to say, look, we really need to know that you're checking where these materials come from, because it's a big part of how we manufacture our products, and it's important for us in how we make the products that we sell. Similar with human capital management, tech companies especially are really reliant on having lots of smart people work for them and develop new products, know how to sell them, develop new use cases for them. So making sure that the company has all perspectives at the table when it's developing new products, selling new products is important. And again, we feel this company is doing a really good job and has made big and public commitments to try to make sure the US population is better represented in its pretty large employee base. The final one is supply chain sustainability, which I alluded to with the material sourcing. Again, it also affects labor rights in the supply chain. So this particular company has a plant in Malaysia where there have historically been problems of forced labor, and we think the company's done a really remarkable job of working with, because it's not a supplier, because it's its own plant, of making sure that the folks it hires are there voluntarily, and the interaction between the employer and the employee are fair. So the final point I'll close on, again, is that investing fundamentally is a very optimistic act. It's very much putting your money for and on the future. So deciding how those decisions will be made is really important, and working with a team like ours or investors that really think about environmental, social, and governance issues will help make sure that your values are really implemented in your portfolios. Thank you.
So I was happy to get a number of carefully prepared questions from the speakers. I'm happy to have those questions. I'm going to totally ignore them because a number of things came to mind as the speakers were sharing their thoughts with us. A big one, and I'm not sure how well I can express this, so we may have to try it a couple of times. There's a tension on a lot of Native American communities to honor traditional values, to honor the environment, but at the same time trying to create economic development for its citizens. And we see that with the coal-fired plant, and I'm sure Levi and many of the tribal leaders here and the economic development personnel here could give us numerous examples of how these things conflict. And so we have experts here on economic development, on the economy, on socially responsible investing. How would you recommend that the people that are in the trenches, not necessarily deciding where to invest their funds, but how to grow their communities, what should they do?
Yeah, as I said when I was speaking about the administration's support for coal, they really support in all in. So in terms of energy, it's alternative energy, it's fossil fuels. In terms of sustainability, if your economy can't grow, it's hard to be sustainable as well. So you have to meet that basic need of growth, as well as try and do well in an environmental sense, or in a governance sense, or in a social sense. And I think one of the common threads that we see in communities is the one I touched on and what Aaron touched on in providing affordable housing. Household formation is so important to creating a unit of support and multiple units of support in a community. It does create that virtuous cycle where when you see greater household formation, and especially households can be formed in rentals or they can be formed with home ownership, but it typically moves along a path of home ownership and a rental, of household formation in a rental, and then household formation in terms of ownership. And as you can increase those rates of ownership, you find that virtuous cycle start to feed on itself in a community where you have lower rates of unemployment, lower rates of poverty, obviously lower homelessness, and better health in a community. So I think that foundation of a home is where it has to start.
I'm going to take it from a slightly different angle. So I think that just as Claire and I were saying, that there's no perfect company, there's no perfect solution to the challenges that we face as a society. And so, we have to use the resources that we have at hand to tackle each challenge one by one. But I think it's also important to continue to check in and make sure that the assumptions that we make at the outset continue to remain true. And so as circumstances change, or as new technology becomes available, we need to be able to adapt and to try and, at least, you don't have to be all in, with your values on day one, but you should probably be moving in that direction over time.
It was really clever the way you worked in the question you wanted me to ask about being all in.
Yes, it is.
So, so would you like to expand on that all-in idea from an investment perspective?
Well, we get asked a lot by clients that we work with, particularly ones that have a very pointed stated mission. Well, if I can't go all in, what's the point of doing it at all, right? Work with some clients down in Texas, and some of them, have oil and gas interests, but they're also very concerned about the impacts of climate change. And so, they're not going to divest of their oil and gas properties. Some cases they may decide to do so, but what they can do is take cash flow from those businesses and put it towards something that actually is more aligned with their personal values, and that provides sort of a counterpoint to maybe some of the things that are happening with the oil and gas interests. And so I don't think it has to be like I said, an all or none proposition. Again, we just want to continue to move in the right direction.
Have anything to add?
Yes, thanks. I think to the initial question, I'd add that I'd encourage the community to really look to the future, right? So again, the idea of not juicing up juicing up returns this quarter at the expense of next year or the year after or the year after. Like, what are the industries of the future, and how do you make sure your community is best set up to benefit in collaboration with those industries?
All right, so we have time for one more question. So you talked about the ESG investing. So when tribes come to Wells Fargo or other financial institutions for funding for their projects, how should they prepare? Because I think I sense that that's more of an issue even outside of the traditional, we're going to take your money and invest it. It's how are we going to loan out money? And so any advice from any of you on how tribes should approach that?
Well, we should probably ask our banking partners on that end. You know what's up?
Sure, yeah, just a quick snippet on that, and obviously offline at any point in time, I'm more than welcome to field some more general questions than that, but some of the main ways that we do that is working through the CDFIs and our charitable grant funding. We have in each, and we always think it's a little bit easier to do this on a micro level, so in the states or the communities in which we serve as opposed to a global level. And so in each state has generally a representative on the philanthropic side that will work with the local communities, the local tribes and whatnot, and help them really direct how they do that. But it really starts with two-way street of communication. Getting to know in those communities who are the individuals that have the wherewithal to be making those decisions on kind of the top of the house projects, and really understanding what they're going towards, right? And then working with, if a community has a CDFI already established, or if they're thinking about getting that established, how to get those things established. But I welcome, particularly to Wells Fargo, we have a grant funding website, we have a charitable contribution website to go check out. Happy to give you that information as well. But I think it's really, if you're going to start that from the ground up, it's a two-way street and it's a partnership, and just really understanding, what's most important to you as the community and how we can help do that. Because again, unfortunately, monies are a scarcity when it comes to that. They're not finite, and so every year there's going to be a certain amount of resources available, and it's open to whomever is willing and able, and also the application process to get through that. But at the same point in time, we want to make sure that we're adhering to our social and sustainable and economic impacts and working with the communities the best that we can. So I think it really starts with that partnership and reaching out, and so we can make it a collaborative effort.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all of our friends from Wells Fargo. Thank you.